Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome. So glad to have each of you here today with us as we learn with and from each other. It's always a pleasure and delight for us to see when individuals show up during this hour of time because it lets us know that you value the content that we share through our podcast, Intentional Conversations. I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. And one of the things I always like to make sure that I do is just acknowledge the hard work that our team at NWC puts forth every single week to make sure that we're bringing this virtual learning experience to the broader community so that we can learn with and from each other and deepen our understanding and knowledge about all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a vodcast where we intersect dialogue of DEI with leadership in business. We also extract the audio and make it available in podcast capacity for those who like to get their content in that regard. I want to invite you now to go to the chat and let us know where you are joining the conversation from today. That is always one of our favorite moments of the hour, just to see the different geographies that are represented, not only within the United States, but also we're so honored to have individuals outside of the US that will join us as well. I also want to let you know that today at NWC, we also want to acknowledge the fact that Diwali took place this week. So happy Diwali to all of those who celebrate. Festivals of Lights is certainly a beautiful reminder of how light triumphs over darkness, knowledge over ignorance, and hope over despair. And this is a celebration that brings families, friends, and communities together to share joy, warmth, and gratitude. And so I want to acknowledge that for everyone that celebrates Diwali. I also want to let you know that here at NWC, we value disability inclusion. And as such, we have enabled closed captioning for those who would gain value from having that available to you during this hour of time. I also want to acknowledge all of the LinkedIn Live individuals who are joining today's episode in that capacity. Not only do we have folks that are part of our Zoom community here, but we also have a lot of individuals that will catch the show via LinkedIn Live. And I want you to know that if that's how you're participating today, be sure that you're going to the comment section to share your sentiments, your thoughts, and questions. We will definitely bring that over into our Zoom chat so that we can be connected as one community for today. If you're part of Zoom, I want you to know that cameras are always welcomed and encouraged. We certainly love smiling faces, but we know that many of you could be multitasking. Maybe you're just here in an auditory capacity, and we're just glad nonetheless to be in community with you in whatever capacity. So sit back, enjoy the show, and look forward to you engaging with our guest co-host momentarily. Welcome. Let the conversations begin, and that is indeed what we are about to do. If you're just tuning in, you have joined the Intentional Conversations VodCast, where we intersect conversations of DEI with leadership in business. I want to welcome each of you today to our show. A couple things that I want to put into your hearing, as this is a very historic time. We know what's upon us this upcoming week. And I just want to do my civic duty to make sure that I am lending my voice towards the importance of voting. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I am here to tell you to vote thoughtfully, but definitely to vote. And your vote counts. It matters. And so don't take it lightly. And we still have time to also recruit others that may be on the fence about whether or not they should vote. Tell them yes, support them in developing their voting strategy, but make sure you get them to the polls. Now, we are in the month of November, so happy November, everyone. And as we normally do, we like to share some of the national observances that take place each month to our community of learners here on the VodCast. And so Native American Heritage Month is November. So as we always say, while we like to acknowledge the month in which these national observances take place, do not let that at all stop you from leaning into the many different ways in which you can support, hold space for, advocate, stand in solidarity with members of those marginalized communities that are often underrepresented, underconsidered. And so Native American Heritage Month is here, and we're going to make sure that we're acknowledging all the many contributions of that community to our society. I also want to highlight one of our LinkedIn learning courses. I have 4 that are out there right now, but the one that I am spending some time putting into your hearing today is Navigating AI Through an Intersectional DEI Lens. This course has been opened up by LinkedIn, which means that it is available for free now through December 31st. And so if this is something that you feel like community of learners within your organization or your network would gain value from, tell them not to wait because it is free right now. Do not worry if you do not have a LinkedIn Learning account because right now it can be available to you. And so we're going to share all the information into the chat so that you can take advantage of this amazing offer. I'm also really proud to let you know that I was a part of an effort through the Engagement 101 entity, and it's all about inspiring workplaces. And as part of that, there is an ebook that was released, and it's on building a people-first culture people believe in and belong to. And so we're going to place information for how you can gain access to this ebook into the chat. I hope that you will see it as an incredible resource. Not only am I featured with my voice, but there are also many other incredibly amazing leaders that were able to lend their voice to this topic as well. So I hope you enjoy that resource. Now, I am so excited because we have an official launch date of our paperback version of Inclusion Uncomplicated, and it is taking place in terms of being available in January, which will be our 2-year anniversary of having Inclusion Uncomplicated out into the universe. And so we are releasing a paperback version, and I want you all to be aware of that. And if you don't already have your copy, we do still have some hardback copies that are being ordered through Amazon also, as well as all the many retailers that have copies of my book. But I know the paperback version is something that many folks also look forward to, especially if you're thinking about bulk orders and you want it to be as economical as possible. So thank you for those who have supported me in this journey of releasing that book. Now, we're in a high-stakes political season. We all know that. I just referenced it. And so in addition to the LinkedIn Learning course that's free on AI and the intersectional DEI lens, I also continue to promote addressing hate speech in the workplace. It is now available. And this is a LinkedIn Learning that if you were grappling with how do we ensure political discourse is civil and that we are managing and upskilling our leaders around how to navigate these conversations, because they're all going to happen. They've already started and they're going to continue. And regardless of the results of the election, this is something that you need to be thinking about. So if you need a resource, here's one that I want to put into your hearing, Addressing Hate Speech in the Workplace. We talk about what is the difference between free speech and hate speech? How do we make sure that we are upskilling our leaders to be able to navigate those conversations so that harm can be minimized and your cultures can maintain a healthy balance of people being able to speak and share their perspectives, but at the same time, do it with a great level of respectability. So take advantage of that resource. Now, we are soon upon 2025, a new year, and we are booking for Q1 of 2025. We do have a lot of those spots that have already been secured, but many of our guest co-hosts come by recommendations from each of you. So if you know of someone that you think will add great value to our VodCast community, we want to hear from you. My colleague, Amora Carter, specifically wants to hear from you, and you can email her at amora@nikawhite.com. Okay, now this is part where I give you a little bit of what you have to look forward to in the upcoming weeks by way of our guest co-host at the Intentional Conversations VodCast. And so I'm super excited because Amanda Miller-Littlejohn is going to be joining us next Friday. And in that Intentional Conversation VodCast, we are going to discuss the mental challenges and opportunities of midlife, including our approach to rest, purpose, and ambition. She has a new book that's out, so she's going to share that with us and a lot more other goodness that I think we're going to gain a lot of value from. So join us on November the 8th for that conversation. Now, many of you are excited about this guest co-host, and so am I, because she has such a big presence on social media. But on November the 15th, Lola Bakari, in that conversation, we're going to discuss providing marketing leaders and their teams with empathetic, real talk, fluff-free guidance, actionable thought partnership, and responsible marketing. She is really big on responsible marketing, so we share a background in Marcom, and I know that's going to be a really riveting conversation, so I look forward to that as well. So join us the mid of the month. Now, it does me great pleasure. This is the time in our program where I get the chance to introduce formally our guest co-host. For those of you who've been rocking it with me since we've started Intentional Conversations almost 5 years ago. Yes, next year will be 5. Y'all remember the episode of The Cosby Show where Rudy says, yay, 5. We're going to be yay, 5. And this is my friend, y'all, and he's been on before, but I invited him back because he has some new stuff that's going on that I really think would be of great value to this community to know about. But I will give a formal introduction because I want you to know the accolades, credentials, all the things, the experiences in which our guest co-host today shows up to this conversation. Wade A. Hinton is a seasoned attorney, strategist, and expert in organizational culture and leadership. As the CEO of Hinton Company, Wade partners with organizations to build inclusive cultures that foster innovation and sustainable growth. His career includes serving as Deputy General Counsel for Volkswagen Group of America, where he led legal efforts to build U.S. operations, and as City Attorney for Chattanooga, where he modernized legal operations for greater efficiency. At Unum Group, Wade was Vice President of Inclusion and Diversity, where he developed a global DEI strategy for more than 10,000 employees. Wade is also the author of Bridge Building and a sought-after speaker on strategic leadership and inclusive innovation. His TEDx talk on leadership continues to inspire organizations across all sectors. Wade has been recognized as a German Marshall Fellow and Presidential Leadership Scholar and served on the task force for the future of U.S.-German relations. He has been featured in NBC, Business Insider, and the Tennessean, among others, and has received numerous awards, including being named a top 100 diversity officer. Wade holds a degree from Emory University and the University of Memphis School of Law, with additional studies in international law at Central European University at Budapest. Y'all know what to do now. Y'all find those emojis, find those accolades, find those words of affirmation, whatever it is, while I stop sharing my screen to bring my friend into our spotlight. But let him know how appreciative we are for him sharing with us today. And Wade, before I release you to greet this audience in your own way, we do have a tradition here. And listen, you probably should know this because some of you may remember we've had Wade on before. But that tradition is we've read your bio, we've heard all the things, all the great things about you. But what do we not know about you that you can share that we would not learn about you from reading your bio or even from looking at your LinkedIn profile? Welcome, my friend.
Yeah, well, Nika, first of all, thank you for having me. It's certainly a pleasure to be here with you and work with you in this capacity. I mean, we work with each other a lot and talk a lot, right? But in this capacity, it's always great to be here. I also want to say that thank you for encouraging your listeners, your viewers to go out and vote. It is only a few days away, and so for a number of places across the country, your early voting has ended, or it might end today. Just look at your calendar. But for others, right, you have election day, and for some states, you can still register to vote. So even if you are not registered, you're thinking about it, you have family members that need to, you can still, there are some states with same-day voting. So I want to just encourage everyone to really focus on your civic duty, and because every vote counts and your voice matters. So what is it that I would share that's not on my LinkedIn or bio is, so I think you might know this, but I'm not sure. So I almost went to school for music. I'm a huge music lover. I played the double bass for many of my years growing up and was actually going to study at Vanderbilt's Blair School of Music. And got in, actually would have studied under one of the best bassists in the world at that time, Edgar Meyer. But chose to go a different route. I went to Atlanta instead of Nashville for school, where I actually studied with your sister Joy. But I went there in many ways because when I was in Nashville at the time, Nashville is not what it is today, right? We know Nashville's been this really, it is not what it is today. And so during that time, I was experiencing something. I don't feel like I'll have the social outlets that I need to really thrive and grow. And so I chose Atlanta instead. But that's it. I still love music. Every Friday morning, I'm up listening to the new releases on New Music Friday. That's one of the first things you'll see me doing on Friday morning. So I'm still a big music lover.
I love that. And no, I don't think I knew that. And Wade, we've been connected for quite some time. So as Wade mentioned, y'all, this conversation may feel a bit more informal and conversational, although all of our vodcast conversations are pretty informal. But Wade and I have history. We have collaborated several times, as he mentioned. And so this is also kind of a moment for us to catch up. But thank you for sharing that, because no, I did not know that you were such a music buff. And so I appreciate that. I want to go back to something that you amplified, which is the importance of voting. And were you an early voter?
I was an early voter.
Okay,
My
I
family
was an
and I
early
went
voter as
there,
well.
and
Yeah,
we took. So my daughter goes to vote me every time since she was born in
great.
2016, and so she was with me when I cast a vote for for Hillary Clinton, and so I want her to see and experience that. So that's just a part of what we do.
I love that. I love that. And I think that we need to do more of that. Let's let our young children see us voting and being very responsive to that civic duty that we have. And I've heard of a lot of parents doing that. So that's encouraging. So we were early voters as well, my husband and I. And then we took our adult daughter. I'm saying we took her. She was like, yeah, I want to go with y'all. And my son, who is also adult, he lives in Nashville, Tennessee, of course, your neck of the woods. And I flew him home. He's coming home today because he just recently moved there and his license is still a South Carolina license. And I didn't want to play with that. And so I'm like, we're getting you on a plane.
Yeah, yeah,
We have our strategy mapped out where you're going to go. But
I love
nonetheless, I look forward to that. But I share that story because let's not take anything for granted. Let's do all the things to double check, triple check so that our vote can count. And I think that's critically important. Okay, so let's jump into our conversations for today. Wade reminded me that the last time he was on, which was maybe a few years ago, it was when Zoom was still kind of early. And throughout almost our 5 years, we've had a handful of times where, unfortunately, we had some Zoom bombers. And it was Wade on the show that you came that we had a Zoom bomber. We were able to get them out, but it certainly was a disruption for a brief moment. And so I've already named and claimed that that's not going to happen today. That's not going to happen today.
It's not going to
So,
happen, but I will tell you whenever I get on the Zoom call now, it's sort of PTSD. So I'm like, is anybody going to jump in here? Just want to let you know that that's happening after that experience.
I know. He joked with us by saying before we started that he's been in therapy ever since that time. And we all laughed about it. But hey, therapy's not a bad thing. So if we got you to
Great
start
thing.
going to therapy, that's a good thing. Yeah.
That's a great thing.
Okay. So can you walk us through, Wade, the pivotal moments in your career that shaped your approach to leadership and organizational culture?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is in terms of those moments, one was deciding to come back to Chattanooga, right? So after law school, I decided to come back home, which I never thought I would do. Part of
Yeah.
it was, and it was hard to name back then, Nika, but when I was saying I didn't experience that sort of social connection in Nashville, I didn't have that here, and it was that sense of belonging, right? I didn't feel that sense of belonging that I had my friends, I had my neighborhood, I had my school, but I didn't have that broader sense of belonging in the community. And so,
Yeah.
but deciding to come back to me was a moment where I was like, I want to make sure I'm serving. I'm trying to actually create connection because I experienced Chattanooga growing up one way. I experienced this as something else as a lawyer. And so a lot of folks have heard me talk about these two Chattanoogas and how to actually be in those rooms where I might be the only, but making sure that my voice is not the only voice that's being represented. And so that's how I approached it. But so that to me was something that has been really impactful. I will tell you this too, that there have been moments where I'm like, socially, I'm like, I need to, go to another city, but I'm a person of faith. And so every time I ask for like, oh, I really want to work at a larger law firm, God was like, well, here's a larger law firm for you right here. I really want to work at a global organization. Well, here's Volkswagen for you, right? So every time I had those moments, things would happen, and God would bless me with those things. The second thing was going to Volkswagen, right? When I went there, I had been a German Marshall Fellow, so I had some exposure to German culture, but being in house allowed me to begin to see myself as being more than a lawyer, right? I had a really good career as an attorney, but I was then getting placed on projects, right, that had some things had nothing to do with the law. It was more about leading, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
going into these spaces, right, but I'm also was not a lot of folks that look like me in the rooms. but I could champion and try to really speak up for and try to think about strategies that can support more marginalized groups. And so that passion, that love for trying to create opportunities and access certainly has influenced how I show up in different ways. And one, again, not sort of having that identity foreclosure of just thinking that I'm a lawyer only, but I'm also a leader. So those are two moments I would raise.
Yes, no, I love that. I think that sometimes we can see ourselves just in a single light, right, based upon our career, our profession. But across all those different endeavors that we may attach ourselves to, at the end of the day, we also need to make sure that we are modeling the type of leadership that we want others to subscribe to. So I love that about you. I also appreciate the recognition of not everyone feels compelled to come back home, right, where their roots are.
Yeah.
And I think I can identify with that because I also came back to the region, the central region in which I grew up as well, and that's important to me. That's important to me. So I want to go a little bit deeper into all of these many different intersecting experiences that you've had from public service to corporate America. Can you share a little bit how those roles across different sectors influence your strategies for building inclusive leaders and inclusive workplaces? Because that's also been a very big part of your platform, and it continues to be.
Yeah. So, from a public sector perspective, there was a great Omega man who I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Shout out to the brothers out there.
Knew
But
it was coming.
Paul A. McDaniel, he was a pastor here. He was really part of the civil rights movement. Great man, and he also served on the county commission here. And one of the things I would hear him say is, "You got to know how to count." And for those who are in politics knows that means I got to know how to count my votes, right? How to get my votes, which meant to me the importance of building consensus and building connections and trying to make sure that there is support for those things, right? That you're trying to move forward. No matter how good the initiative is or the idea is, right? Unless you can get sort of buy-in and support, it really can't be implemented fully and get the support that it needs in many ways, budgetarily, otherwise. So for me, when I think about trying to move strategies forward, it's about really having a conversation. I learned this both from the public sector, but I've been able to apply it in the private sector. It's about having those conversations, understanding what's important to those leadership, what's important to the organization in terms of its long-term vision and its strategy, and then trying to make sure that, the work you're doing complements that. I think oftentimes what I tend to talk about when you think about culture change and shifts, it needs to be something that is aligned with the overall business strategy. It needs to sort of feel like it's operationalized and it's a part of the work, the overall work of the organization, as opposed to something that's separate. One of
Yeah.
one of the things I've seen is like, DEI efforts and culture work feels like they're nice to haves. And sometimes it's like because it's not really implemented or integrated into how you operate. And so the more you can operationalize this, the more it becomes a part of your core. It's harder to actually say, well, we're not going to do this anymore, right? So that's just
Yeah.
something that from a overall strategic framework or perspective is something I've learned both in the public and private sector.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that that is absolutely critical. And in fact, I am seeing this growing trend where organizations are starting to recognize the significance of having a fully embedded DEI culture and mindset across all areas of operations, which is the way to go. This work does not just belong to one singular department or individual. Everyone has to do their part. And what I'm seeing as a trend is that there are organizations who are identifying person in every department of operations that is charged with thinking about the DEI lens and how to infuse that. And so I just wanted to bring that to the conversation because I love the innovative ways and creative ways in which we're starting to solve for deepening the value and the output and impact of this work. I think you said, Wade, that really connects with me is this notion of the ability to bring people along. You talked about how do we build consensus? And the reality is that sometimes we can't build consensus, but we can exercise an inclusive decision-making process by
Sure.
hearing from all, right? And taking that seriously into consideration. I
Right.
often say nothing about me without me, right? And so when
Yeah.
you think about public service and when you think about being an inclusive organizational leader, you have to make sure that you doing the work to hear from all, to understand how whatever decision that could be before us is impacting all different types of people. So I love that. And I consider that to be bridge building, which kind of gets me to this
Well,
next question.
well, can I say one quick thing? And so that's a part of what we had to do. Like when I was city attorney, when we
Yeah,
were trying to do, one other difference in the private and public sector, right? You have different stakeholders, right? So
right,
in the public
right.
sector, you're thinking about the citizens and the residents of your community that you're impacting. And so one of the things we would do is we would bring in citizens and residents to hear their voice, right? When we're going to
Yeah,
implement a new ordinance that we know would have an impact on their neighborhoods, we bring them in. And so if we're making a decision around an ordinance that's impacting development, we bring in planners and others to hear their voice. And it's something that Shirley Franklin said. It reminds me of what you just mentioned. And she said, people want to feel like you did something with them and not to them. And so
yes,
bringing them in to
yes.
have those conversations, and then the other part of it is when they have some skin in the game and they have their voice, they own a little bit of it too, right? And so that's a
Yes.
bit more, it's something where it's not, oh, that's Nika's thing, right? It's our thing, and it's just a little bit different.
Yeah, I just want to amplify what you just said. People want to know that you're doing things with them and not to them. That is really powerful, and it just deserved a moment of amplification. So I wanted to bring that back to the remembrance. And so what we were just talking about has a lot to do with bridge building. So it's no surprise to me that you have released an ebook that's called Bridge Building. And so what do you hope readers will take away from it? And what was the impetus for inspiring this particular ebook content?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So I think people will tell you, I think my partner Yana will tell you that I am a perpetual optimist. I really do believe that things will be, good but I honestly felt a little hopeless when having conversations with folks, and we just may be from a policy perspective be just on different spectrums, right? And so, I don't like that. And like my first job in politics or in government was with a county mayor who was fantastic. He was of a different political party than I was, right? But I learned so much, and I learned how to navigate a lot of things because of his sort of modeling that, to your point about modeling behavior. And I didn't like the fact that we're at a place that doesn't feel like we can have those kinds of conversations anymore. And so the more I looked into it, and also on top of that, we had clients asking us about how should we make statements on this? How do we navigate these issues
Right.
where we know it's really polarized? So, the more I thought about it, I was like, I became really interested, right? In trying to figure out how do I have conversations with people that, it, I feel like, I'm entering the room and there's no way we can find common ground. And again, that's not a place where I live based, I'm sharing that. And so I think with the conversation with the team, we said this is something that we really want to try to get done. And once I started the research and seeing that what was out there, it was amazing. And it's a short. It was supposed to be like 12 pages, but it is not. But and I definitely think over time I'll probably do something a little bit lengthier. But
Yeah.
that was really it. Two things. Again, I wanted to feel hope again, and it's also in response to what we're hearing from clients.
Well, I'm glad it's not 12 pages because that would have been a tease. And I think it's such an important topic, and you would have had us wanting more. And I am also glad to hear that there's some plans for you to be able to even extend the book to some additional content down the road. But for now, the ebook is available, and we have shared it into the chat. And so we hope that you all will take advantage of that. And it's so timely. I mean, the release of it is so timely. I mean, this conversation is pretty evergreen, but when I think about all that's happening right now, it is very timely. We need to be proactive about bridge building, right? About civil discourse and navigating organizations where across difference, right? And I think all of that's really critical. And it brings me to this conversation of polarization, which we know is really in front of us right now in many respects in the workplace. But what role do you believe that leadership should play in addressing this current state of polarization in the workplace?
Yeah. So first of all, I think leaders set the tone for their
Of
cultures and
course.
organizations, period, right? I mean, we've got to acknowledge whether you're saying, hey, we want to try to create a culture that does X, Y, and Z, or you're not saying anything, there's still a culture, right? It's being created without guidance. And so we've got to just
Right.
acknowledge that. That's number one. Second thing is, I think from an overall leadership perspective, you have to be aware enough, self-aware enough to know that this is not self-aware, but just acknowledge that this is happening, right? You can say, well, we're going to sort of take the ostrich approach, right? Put our head in the sand and it's not, nothing's going to, if we don't talk about politics, it's not going to enter the workplace. It's entered the workplace. It's a matter of whether you acknowledge it or not, right? The third thing I would say is, this is not about, we're not endorsing or encouraging folks to talk about politics at work. But if you acknowledge that it's there, how do you create a space so you can, whether it's saying, hey, we just want people to vote, or hey, we want to make sure that you're good. Because right now I know there might be a lot of anxiety around the election time. Here's go take advantage of our resources. But it really is ultimately to make sure that leaders are doing the things that are going to be supporting their employees, right? And if you can do that by creating space, by providing those resources, that is a really good first step. But you won't get there if you think that, well, that has nothing to do with business, and
Right.
it's not impacting our employees and just producing widgets. That's because it's not real. And
Not
uh,
real.
yeah, so that's one of the things I would
Yeah.
do right now. Yeah.
I so agree with that, Wade. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of leaders who are operating from the mindset that what's happening outside of the four walls of our respective workplace organization should have no bearing on productivity, on interpersonal interactions. And that is totally misguided because it does. We are humans. And the totality of all of our experiences and all that we're dealing with, it shows up in every space where we physically show up.
Right.
And I think that that's really important for people to realize, leaders in particular, to realize. And I'm seeing a lot of talk right now around other organizational leaders and practitioners encouraging people with the election, of course, season being right here upon us, to hold space and time for people to maybe not be quite as on, 100% of the day during these next couple of weeks, right? Maybe you're going to experience some anxiousness or anxiety coming from your employees. Normalize that and give them space and time to be able to process that in a way that feels like we are valuing the humanity of our colleagues. The other thing that you said that I want to just lift up is the importance of acknowledgement and naming things. I think that sometimes we believe that not bringing the elephant in the room is a way to have it to not create conflict. But I am like, name it, acknowledge it. Doesn't mean that you're going to have a solution that's going to completely solve for it, that's going to allow everyone to feel at ease. But what it does do, to your point, Wade, is that acknowledgement sends a message of, from a leader perspective, you're not oblivious to what else could be impacting people and how that could be, presented in the interactions and the collaborations and the team building or the lack thereof, right? And so I think the acknowledgement of it can go a really long way, a
Well, and
really long way.
I was going to say too, Nika, to that point, right? I mean, there are so many, you said this earlier, there's so many things that impact us outside the four walls that we bring into work. And so whether it's dealing with, this election season, or if it's childcare, we saw that a lot during the height of the pandemic, right? Or
Yes.
other things, it's going to impact our productivity. So if you're not creating sort of this empathetic culture where someone can say, I'm struggling at home, what then
Wow.
it's going to again have, I think, some negative repercussions. I do think that that we're seeing where cultures where they don't do that. I mean, people are choosing to not stick around. So for leaders, again, it only takes a moment to acknowledge it. We're not encouraging you to go out and say, here's a broad statement, but the main thing is making sure that you're doing the work that tells employees that we're showing up for you, we're here for you, um, and providing those resources and words of support.
Yeah, this conversation actually reminds me, Wade, that I think one of the most impactful ways you and I have been able to collaborate and partner was during your time at Unum, which
Mm,
was soon after George Floyd's murder.
yeah.
And you had organized in your role as the lead for diversity, equity, and inclusion, these listening and sharing sessions to give people space, but then to also upskill the managers or with some tools to help them to also know how can I show up in this moment for our Black and Brown employees and other employees that are also deeply impacted because of the impact on Brown and Black colleagues. And so that was a great display. You're not just, sharing this as a tip, you're living it. And that was a great display that came to mind as you were sharing about holding space and acknowledging some of what people are dealing with. And so I want to commend you because that was one direct example of how I saw you show up in that regard.
Well, thank you, Nick. And I want to say to folks out there who are trying to figure this out, just know that this election is so close, right? That it was. I think you mentioned it's like no, irrespective of who wins next week, we have about 50%, 50%. So have your employees theoretically, right, based on could feel a certain kind of way next week. And so I do think it's important that we figure this out and how to have in your own way, right? You don't have to do what some other organization is doing just because you want to do a copy and paste. Do it that's in a way that's unique to your organization and really shores up your own values.
Yeah, and I would challenge that a bit, Wade, because while wherever the decision lands, you reference that 50-50. I would say 100%, regardless of where we land with the decision, everyone is going to be impacted. And here's
Well,
why I
that's
say
true.
that.
That's true. Yeah.
Even for those who are team Harris, Waltz, um, I believe deeply that if the outcome is in the favor of Harris and Waltz, you're still are going to have individuals that were in that camp that are going to feel very anxious. What's going to happen now? Will I be
That's very
treated
true.
differently?
Yeah.
Do I now need to kind of hide and shrink back and kind of not take up space? I mean,
Yeah.
all of these things. There are
Yeah.
even talks of people being incredibly vigilant and cautious after the election and kind of, if you can, don't necessarily try to travel, just kind of lay low for a little bit. And
Yeah.
so I venture to say that yes, we all are going to feel the tension points regardless of the outcome. Yeah, what would
I
you say
think
to
I
that?
think I think that's right. So thank you, Nika, for calling that. You're absolutely right. I do think that there will still be I mean, there's going to be some anxiety. I think on no matter where who you vote for. But it really does speak to where we are, right,
Yeah.
as a country. And this is again one of the reasons why we thought, a workplace, I know we haven't, the workplace is typically where you show up, you want to produce widgets and all of those other things, but you spend so much time and you do have an influence there. So how do you create a space and time for your employees to feel safe? And
Yeah.
so
So, do you have any, just staying on this topic a little bit longer? And by the way, if any of this is resonating, then feel free to go to the chat, share your thoughts, your sentiments, your affirmations of what aligns with you. Also, if you're on LinkedIn Live, you can go to the comment section. We'll bring that over here so we all can be connected. And
yeah,
momentarily, I
and
will
bring some
shift.
questions, bring some questions
Bring
too.
some questions.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to actually invite that because we will be shifting momentarily to take any questions or comments, any contributions that any of you would like to bring to today's intentional conversation. And if you're part of the Zoom community, you can use the raise hand feature that lets me know that you're willing to be called upon. And if your camera is on, I will invite you to unmute yourself and add you to the spotlight. So while you're percolating though on your questions and curiosities, I want to dig a little bit deeper into this political social tension that we are experiencing and that we believe is going to continue. What are some concrete steps, Wade, that leaders can take to foster inclusivity while managing political and social tensions in their organizations?
Yeah, so one of the first things I would encourage leaders to do is, again, with the acknowledgement, right, is really understanding where your organization's values are. Right? I think it's going to be really important. I was with the group over the weekend talking about their values and helping them reshape what their values could be going forward. But values can pretty much feel like in the hope it's in the lobby of our building, our office building. It can be on our website, but no one really is familiar at times with what your core values are as an
So
organization.
true.
So one, get rooted in what your values are as an org. That's one, right? The second thing is, acknowledge that when you make certain decisions, whether it's, supporting a particular group or cause, whatever that is to make space for those who might not necessarily agree with that particular decision. Um, one of the things I feel like we have experienced over the past couple of years, and now we're seeing a lot of pushback is I've talked to individuals who felt like I don't necessarily agree with that approach, but I don't feel like I can say anything because people are going to label me X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
And so the more we can create space for people to feel like they can come to you as a leader, to have that those conversations will be, I think will be a good step as well. A part of that as a leader is to actually just do check-ins yourself, right? And that
Yeah.
might mean,
Yeah.
hey, listen, I know there's a lot going on. How you doing? Right. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean you have to have any solutions at all, right? All you're doing is making sure that your person, your team member can be heard, and they can share their thoughts. And the other thing I would say is to make sure that you know all the resources that are available that you can share with individuals.
People.
If you have an EA
Yeah.
program, if there's a moment, if people need to take a mental health day, whatever those things are, be sure that you understand what those things are. So I'm very fortunate. I'm serving as the United Way campaign chair here in
I
Chattanooga and Hamilton
saw
County.
that.
So we've been going around, we've been talking to leaders about sort of, this United for Working Families, which is a movement to really make sure we're creating workplaces that are supportive of families and however those families are. And one of the things that we realize when talking with leaders is that not everybody knows what those benefits are, right?
Yeah.
And so organizations, you have invested so much time in trying to find the
It's a
benefits,
good point.
resources, and money to purchase those benefits for those employees, but some of these employees don't even know. So make sure that you're familiar enough with what you have so you can make sure those employees take advantage of it. And again, you can be there to support them during this time.
Those are such great recommendations. And what I love about them is that some are a bit more complex than others, but many of them are just very practical.
Yeah.
So sometimes we feel like we have to boil the ocean in order to have impact, but those high quality check-ins, making sure that you are seeking out ways to ensure someone feels safe to share a dissenting point of view without feeling like they're going to be labeled in a certain way. I mean, those are some practical things that I feel like all of us can incorporate into our leadership. And I think that that's really critical. We don't need to make this hard. Um, and so, yes, thank you so much for all of those contributions. I'm not seeing any hands right now, which is totally fine. Maybe people are still kind of percolating, but I want to go to another question. I want to talk specifically about your TEDx talk.
Yeah.
By the way, that's on my bucket list. And so you have accomplished something that I am wanting to emulate. And so maybe you can give me some tips at some point. But um, I would love for you just to socialize around what that experience was like. And also, we're going to share your TED Talk actually into the chat. I would love for folks to be able to go and check that out.
That sounds good.
Um, and, and anything else that you feel like is really important to socialize with this broad community.
Yeah, sure. Before we go to that, I wanted to say one thing about the leader component aspect too, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
within the ebook, we provide a framework how you
Mhm.
can have some of these conversations, especially with those who, might be checked out a little bit or not as engaged on a topic. And the B is a sort of acronym, build, right? And one of the things we start out with is saying really be curious, right? Be interested in why they might feel a certain kind of way, asking questions, right? Really leaning in, actively listen, right? Instead of waiting to sort of say what you want to say, right? Making sure that you're going to the conversation without an agenda, or really trying to be curious about it, understanding their viewpoint and their perspective, allowing them to actually share what it is about that particular uh, topic is, why it matters to them, what is the impact to them, right? Right. And then and also, when you do that, right? So if there's a particular topic or issue where it is maybe contrary to your values as an organization, as you listen to some of those things, you may want to just begin to talk about like how this connects or ties into those values, right? So there are all kinds of techniques you can use, but a couple of things I would just tell leaders as you go into those conversations, you could at times feel like it's going to be a challenging conversation. This is about conflict.
Right.
But go in with the mindset of saying, listen, I want to just learn from this person. Because when you're there to listen and learn and being curious, there are things that you will possibly come to you that you had no clue about, right? So, um, and the other part of this, when you're having some of these conversations, it allows that person to slow down and think sort of more rationally, if you will, more logically about the position and why it matters to them. And so, as we're beyond the election day and getting to Thanksgiving, think about having these conversations even with folks that are maybe with different beliefs, and you can start with saying, listen, I know that, you believe this. I'd love to learn more versus how could you believe that?
Right.
Because once you,
Yeah,
we ask those questions, we come in
we
hot, it's
do.
too late. The wall's up. They're not going to talk to you. I mean, now it's a who's going to win this thing. But if you can go in talking about, listen, I know I'd love to learn more about, how you came to this, whatever. And so, and if they said, hey, listen, I really, this is what happened, right? This is why I believe this. And so it's like, well, why is that important to you, right? And then repeating those things back, being able to actually ask them, like on a scale, if you're talking about a political issue, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that, right? Getting them
Yeah.
to think more logically, because what we do naturally is we start with we may see a video or a post or something like that. We get it and we begin to go down this binary bias bucket, right, or path, right, and we say us versus them, uh,
Right.
and so we sit there because of the group reinforcement. So I just wanted to make sure from a leader perspective, I know I said a lot here, but there is a framework where you can have those conversations
Right.
in a way that's constructive, and it doesn't feel like it has to be all, you
Right.
know, a challenge or conflict.
Yes, I think sometimes it requires us to quiet our egos before we walk into those conversations.
Right.
So I love that you have a practical framework that's in your ebook again, which we have shared into the chat. And that framework was called Build, if I'm not mistaken. I was trying to capture all. I got the Be Curious, I got the I for Impact, the L for
Well,
Learn.
it's B for Bill, U for understand, I is for understand the impact, L is for learn and look at your values, and D is for determine those next steps, if it, at all, right? So
Love it.
you can apply it to so many different conversations beyond the workplace as well. But your question about TEDx, let me tell you, Nika, it's so funny because um, I wanted to do a TEDx for a while, and I got the nod to do it, and it was taking place. I remember it was about 4 years ago at this time, and it was taking place maybe 3 weeks after I announced I was running for office. So you can imagine, like, I'm going through all of this sort of life change and everything else. So I'm trying to get this TED talk done. So and it was during COVID, so I didn't get a chance. It wasn't an audience. So, but I was so honored to be able to do this and sort of talk about some practical ways that people can create be more inclusive. Um, but I will tell you, it was so much anxiety going into that, mostly because I was also doing the
Timing.
yeah, I was also getting ready to learn how to run for office. I mean, I'm I'm out there for the first time ever. So but it was a great experience. I would love to do another one in the future. Uh,
Uh,
one where I feel like I have a little bit more time and things that nature.
sure.
But it was great. Yeah.
No, so that is a big distraction, running for office and then trying to also prepare for a TED Talk. Yeah. So I do as you, I do a lot of public speaking, whether it's presentations, keynotes, just facilitating different long, short format learning experiences. But I have to tell you, there's something in the pit of my stomach that gives me a little anxiety about the TED Talk because I don't know what it is. I think it's because it's so structured, and just because you are a great, orator or presenter does not necessarily make you a great TED Talk speaker. And I know that's part of that's intentional. That's part of what they've built, right? And so
Yeah.
anyway, I would love to kind of, yeah, get some tips from you at some point.
Well, listen, I was going to say this, and one thing, and I again thank you so much for those who didn't know, Nika. We held our first leadership conference earlier this year, and I can't believe it's
Ascension.
yeah. So
I'm still swooning over that. It was a great experience.
well, great. I'm glad it was. And so April 10th is the one we're going to do for next year, where we have the date locked down.
Mm.
But you did such a, I mean, your presentation was on story. And I feel like with
Yeah.
TED Talks there, it really is,
Yeah.
story resonates. Even with this TED Talk, you'll see I start out telling a story about my daughter and how, our power, how we can use our power to bring people along and bring them in and make them feel that sense of belonging. So, um, anyway, but I think you'd be fantastic. I would love to talk to you about it, but I think you would knock it out of the box. I think you have a
Oh,
ton
well, you're
of
kind.
lead. Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
kind. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, friend. I really do. And I'm glad that you gave us a little bit of insight as to what your talk was on, because I was going to go there next. And hopefully we can find it. I don't know if it's already been placed into the chat, but hopefully we could. Do you remember what is the exact title of your TED Talk?
Oh,
Do you recall?
I think it's three ways to be an inclusive leader or something like that. I can't
Okay, I
remember.
think I did
Yeah,
see that then. Yes, I think I did
yeah,
see that. It
yeah,
is in the
yeah.
chat. Okay, great. So yeah, we will definitely check that out. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left and I'm still not seeing any hands, which is totally fine. Let me just double check because I don't want to deny anyone that has been patiently waiting to engage with you with questions. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything just yet, but I want to go to the next question. And this one is about implementation of innovation through diverse perspectives. I am very much a fan of sending the message to practitioners that are in this space, this broad space right now of DEI and all the things that fit under that big umbrella, to think more critically and more innovatively in order to be able to solve for catapulting the work to the next level. Because I feel like if we aren't careful, we'll find ourselves in a rut, continuing to do the same thing over and over and over again, not seeing the results that we need and that our society deserves. And so, how do you like to encourage individuals with strategies to bring forth innovative solutioning to what we're experiencing right now in this space of DEI work?
Well, and I think I understand the question. And so, what I think, when I think about implementation and at organizations, first, I'm a big believer in, um, your journey is your journey. I know you were into like bar and we were talking about this earlier in
Yeah.
yoga. So I remember being in a yoga class and someone saying, "Hey, just pay attention to your own mat." Right? Because if
Uh,
you look over and you see someone else doing this fantastic move, you're feeling all kind. It's like, why can't I do that? Why can't I do this with my legs? All those things. And then I realized I just turned 35, right? I'm kidding around, but I realized that I just don't. It's not the same. But what I mean by that is, as an organization, what I've seen a lot of organizations do is say, well, so and so is doing this. And it's really easy to get caught up in that comparison game where you want to do all of these different, you want to, reach the finish line before taking your first step. And so what I try to do is we do we sit and we talk and we listen to organizations on where they are, and then we find out what works for them, right? And so it's not cookie cutter, it's really about what works for them. And when you listen enough, you realize that there are some really practical things that they can do that it may be innovative, right? But it's a simple tweak that can make all the change in the world, right? And
right.
so you think about Apple going from, well, here's this iPod. Oh, let's simply make it a phone, right? And this is one tweak that might make it a difference, and it's really innovative, and we never look at it the same anymore, right? And so that's the approach we try to take. It may be, oh, we're going to this partnership needs to be different in terms of how we're recruiting. We need to track this data a little different. We need to ask these types of questions in terms of our engagement. We need to have our CEO going out and listening a little bit more or
Right.
sharing some thoughts. And so those are small things that actually have big impacts in a way that I think we've seen a lot of success with. The other part of it is, to the best we can, and this gets to your earlier comment around getting different leaders and different departments to take ownership.
Yeah.
We know that there's still a heavy concentration of the work and the effort when it comes to DEI, inclusion and culture, that's
Right.
concentrated in a very small group of people at the organization.
Mm,
Typically, it's the CHRO, it's the CEO, it's the chief diversity officer. It's a very small group.
right.
More you can, again, implement it into your regular business operations, and it feels like it's because it is business operations, then again, it's more ownership there. And that's the part
Yeah.
where we try to take that approach. And again, we've seen some good success with it. But we do know that like it's everyone's different and you can't
Yeah.
provide a solution that they can't afford to do. They don't
I
have the
agree.
capacity to do, right? And doesn't have the
Right.
ability to be scaled throughout the organization.
Yeah, there's so much nuance to consider as well across different organizations, industries, based on size and where they are within the broad continuum of DEI work. And so, one of the things that I have leaned a lot into is the agility that is often required to take maybe a conceptual idea and make it work most effectively across different organizations through customization, right? You can't
Right.
just lift a program and initiative and say you need to implement this here. And I have
Right.
found that a lot of our clients have really valued that because, we have to take into consideration what is the current state of that very specific organization. I don't want to lose another nugget that you shared today, and that was pay attention to your own mat.
Mhm.
Oh, I am appreciating that because I felt like you were in my bar class this morning. So interestingly
Wow.
enough, before we started at the top of the hour, we were just chit-chatting and I shared with Wade that I was just coming back from a bar class this morning. And I don't mind working out. I've been pretty consistent with my fitness regimen since my early 40s. I'm 48 now. And so I really value that. That keeps me middle of the ground. It keeps me centered. It keeps me grounded in this work that is incredibly hard. But I recently started incorporating bar, and it is kicking my butt.
Mm.
And my daughter, who obviously is, she's young, she's limber, she takes bar with me, and she says, "Mom, you need to just take a break," because she feels like I'm going to pass out in that moment. But to make this story short, what I said to her was, "Hannah, I am not going to pass out. I know my body. I just want to keep going because no one in the class is stopping." I said, "Everyone else is continuing to go." She said, "But mom, you need to do your own thing."
Yeah.
And and so anyway, I am holding the tension points of being inspired by a community of others that are also pushing themselves, but at
Yeah.
the same time being self-aware to know where your lane is and what's going to be most effective for you. And so I wanted to bring that back as we were talking about this level of innovation that we need to bring to this body of work. It's going to look different. I am not a fan of organizations benchmarking to be able to get a score of am I A, am I a B compared to XYZ. I am very much in favor of benchmarking against self, right? Benchmark against your own organization. What did you do last year that you know that you can catapult to the next level, you can improve upon? Because let's face it, Wade, no one's at 100%. And until you're at 100%, there's always room to grow and get better and deepen the commitment. And so I love that. Pay attention to your own map. That was for me. I'm accepting it. Thank you.
Well, listen, I had to do that. I was in a yoga class. So we had just real quick, had a former mayor, Bob Corker. He was a senator at the time, U.S. senator, and so he ended up being in a class, and I'm like, I don't do yoga all the time. Apparently, he does it all the time, and so I was like,
Yeah.
let me try to. It was little comparison competitiveness, and I had to really take a step back to say, listen, I'm just not going to do that right now. This is early on. I will get there, and I
Yeah.
think the part we have to continue to tell ourselves as organizations, we will get there. Like nothing was perfect
Yeah.
on day one. And including the other side of this from an innovation perspective is if you can make sure you have a learning culture where it doesn't have
Yes.
to be perfect on day one, and you can try
Yes.
pilots and all these other things to get to really see if it's doable, if it works, effective, impactful, then try that as well. But what makes it really challenging, I think, at times in a DEI space and culture space is the organizations wanted to be 100% effective,
Right.
impactful, and perfect on day
Yeah.
one. And it's just, it's
On
just
day
it's
one.
not real. It doesn't happen with tech. It doesn't happen with
Right.
anything else that you do around the
Right.
organization. So let's make some space for grace, if you will, for
Yes.
DEI and culture.
Yeah, don't put that pressure on ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
progress over perfection
Right.
is what I often share with my clients. So we're like 2 minutes before the top of the hour, and I want to first say thank you, Wade. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a collaborator, bringing me in on lots of things that are going on in your world. Thank you for your leadership in this space and this work. I'm so grateful that our paths have connected in such a way to where there is this strong support and championing of each other's work. And I want to leave you with an opportunity to give us the final words and remarks. We've talked about a lot. You've dropped a lot of many great gems, but I'm sure there's something else maybe that you could be holding in mind that you have a lot of energy around that perhaps you have not been able to socialize with this community. I want to give you a chance to do so at this time.
Listen, I thank you, Nika. Thank you for your friendship and your support. You were always there as I was getting started with this business, either this firm, you were there to give guidance. So thank you for all the work you're doing, week in, week out, right, and just around the country. So really appreciate you and your team and making impact the way you do. I'll just say, as we wrap up here, going back to the importance of voting, making sure that you get out to make sure your voices are heard, that you're bringing people along to that to again to participate in their civic duty. There hasn't been a more important lesson to me than this one, and I just want to just encourage everyone as we think about the future. We were talking about our kids earlier today, that it's really for them, right? And as much as we're
Yeah.
doing this work, we're really trying to create a future that's better, that's brighter, that's more inclusive,
Yes.
that has full of opportunity and access for them. So I want to just encourage people to do that. The other thing I would ask people to do as you read this book is to make sure you're looking for truth when you're doing things, right? When you're hearing
Mhm.
things, look for truth. I mean, true. What was true? I'm sorry. What is true?
Yeah.
There's a difference
Yeah.
between truth and what's
Yeah.
true, right?
Yeah.
I can have my truth, but it doesn't mean it's
Yes.
right. And
So for
so,
somebody else, yes.
yeah, so you've got to figure out what the real facts are and make sure that you're doing some critical thinking. This book sort of gives some guidance as to how we came to this place where we think things are true, but they really aren't. This truth.
Mm.
So I just want to encourage folks to really take a step back when they're having those conversations, and also have the courage, and it takes absolute courage to say, hey, to your friends who might be thinking differently, here's what I've learned. Because it takes
Mhm.
courage, because
Yeah.
people will choose community over accuracy any day
Mm.
because they don't want to be excluded from those groups. And so take the courage to have the critical thinking, take the courage to be able to speak up, because again, you're unique, and we need your voice in every space. That's it.
I wish we had at least 5 more minutes because you just dropped some bombs there that I so want to unpack. I mean, it's so great. I mean, community over accuracy and then true versus truth. Anyway, my friend, thank you so very much. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a safe weekend. If you have not voted yet, vote, vote, vote. And we look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations VodCast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Wade.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.